I keep saying I'm out. I'm done. I never meant to make this many videos in Unscripted, let alone on a regular schedule. Don't get me wrong, I like making these videos. I find it extremely gratifying whenever I craft a great edit, and I still get giddy whenever someone pours their heart out into the comments of my Last of Us Part 2 video. I started this series as a way to bolster my editing portfolio and showcase my knowledge of screenwriting as I went through college. Over time, I tried to use this as an educational tool for those looking to learn about certain fundamentals on screenwriting through things like Star Wars as opposed to Citizen Kane. But that quickly evolved into me just rambling about my own feelings at a certain point in time, while revisiting some of my favorite media to the maximum 25 people who watched them. There's a finite number of these things that have genuinely elicited a strong emotional reaction out of me. There's even less themes I can do a deep dive into in order to understand something new about myself. I started treating my scripts like long poems in terms of structure and word choice, but I worry that I sound too pretentious for myself, too disingenuous. I'm supposed to love film, love good writing, and yet a quarter of my videos is about video games, another quarter is about television, and one video is about the Transformers movies. Even with this video, I'm doing nothing different. I promised myself to really focus on a legitimate, some would say pretentious film selection and analysis if I were to ever do another video. I promised myself there was nothing else for me to understand about myself. But again, like the legendary adventurer Nathan Drake, I keep getting pulled back in. I've been playing a lot of Uncharted 4 recently, but before we talk about why, I need to cover the bases. For those who don't know, Uncharted 4: Thieves in was developed by Naughty Dog and released as a PS4 exclusive early in the spring of 2016. Obviously, it's the fourth in the Uncharted series, which follows a young adventurer and scoundrel named Nathan Drake and his gang of compatriots, an old weathered gruff named Victor Sullivan, or Sully, and Nate's on-again, off-again love interest and journalist Elena Fisher, as they explore the world in search of ancient mythological artifacts and cities. It was one of the early PlayStation 4 exclusives that really showcased the graphical fidelity of the console, and had a strong influence on this generation of narrative-heavy games. It's got a grappling hook, it's got Crash Bandicoot. I don't even like Crash Bandicoot. It was almost universally lauded and even took the title of Game of the Year back in 2016. Wait, what? Overwatch? Freaking Overwatch? There's so much I love about this game. If you watched me before, you know how much I love Naughty Dog for taking these epic, cinematic experiences into an interactive medium. There's a lot of people who question Uncharted's merit to even be called a game, as a majority of the gameplay is comprised of either walking or mindless climbing, but I love it regardless. There's something new around each corner. Bridges and pathways fall apart as you walk over them, making even the simplest traversal memorable. I love the characters here. I could just simply simp over Norland North and its portrayal of Nathan Drake, but that'd be a disservice to my ultimate man crush Troy Baker as Sam, Emily Rose as Elena, who deserves an essay on her own. I love all of her little mannerisms. I love the way she sits on the couch like an excited little kid when Nate's playing a game. I love how real her hair looks. She's adorable. I love the quick humor, I love the bad puns. Heck, my mom even loves this game. She caught me playing the last couple of chapters one day and just watched to the end, shouting in little bursts of excitement whenever I made a jump or had to slide down some rocks. It's a good game. Without delving into Lara Croft's early efforts, these games are a perfect homage to the original Indiana Jones adventures. And just like Indy, these games are bombastic, era-defining, the action sequences are engaging, and their stories are completely interchangeable. You could easily sum up the first three games, Drake's Fortune, Among Thieves, and Drake's Deception, in one synopsis paragraph. Joseph Anderson did this perfectly, so I'm just going to drop a link to his video here. But to paraphrase, he says, "The story of this game sees our hero Nathan Drake in a head-to-head struggle with a vastly more powerful opponent, as they hunt for a mythical treasure in a long-lost, ancient city of immeasurable wealth. Although he's the ultimate victor and outwits his enemies, Nathan Drake loses the treasure and realizes his partner, Elena Fisher, is what he really needed all along." Roll credits.
Another lost city destroyed, and we made it out alive. Barely.
Drake is characterized as wild, as a loose cannon. He's the type to dangle off a cliff, climbing up a derailed train car, or hang from a cargo hold on a plane in the middle of the desert without a parachute, without blinking an eye. Uncharted 3 in particular did what all good, decent trilogies do, and used the finale to really dive into the main character's psyche. The first time it really put our hero's actions into question. Nate actually has a bit of a character arc. Uncharted 4 seeks to do the same thing as Drake's Deception to a point, deconstructing Nate and forcing him to question to what end his obsession with treasure hunting and proving himself brings. It makes him ask, for the fourth time now, whether he's willing to give up and realize that Elena is what he needed all along instead. But I like it here a lot more. Now you could just say that's just because of the insane graphical leap between games, and you'd have a point. Even in 2021, this game looks better than half of the big games releasing, in terms of level of detail, with more nuance and facial expression making it able to tell a richer, more in-depth story. Or you could say it's because of the insanely over-the-top action sequences that have this added sense of realism. Or maybe I'm getting ahead of myself in that part. Or maybe you could say I'm more partial to this because it's about pirates. And when it came time as a kid to make the pivotal choice between an obsession with dinosaurs, pirates, or astronauts, I obviously picked pirates. No, there's something about how this game takes its time, how it slows down. Whereas in the original titles, you would arrive in the end city just to spend a couple of chapters there before it crumbles away. Here you explore Libertalia for nearly a third of the game. The main campaign is almost twice as long as the other entries, depending on your playstyle. This finale trades out back-to-back set pieces and shooting galleries for the quaint moments of silence that come with domestic life. And it's in these moments that the big questions Nate's been asked up until now finally have the chance to ruminate and provoke a real discussion.
Hey, are you happy?
That hit me hard. But again, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. To sell it to you quickly, Uncharted 4 challenges Nathan Drake in ways that we haven't seen before. He reunites with a long-thought-dead brother to chase the famed treasure of the revered pirate lord Henry Avery, who is rumored to hide nearly $400 million in gold in the mythical pirate haven of Libertalia. It's a race against time as an old ally, now adversary, is on their heels to find it first. With Sam's life in the hands of the ruthless drug lord that has tasked them with finding the treasure, the brothers embark on a worldwide journey in secret. But that's pretty par for the course. Now his biggest challenge comes before all of this. We pick up a few years after Drake's Deception. Nate and Elena have gotten married, again, and finally settled down for real. Nathan works for a salvage crew, and colors so neatly within the lines that he won't even take a job in Malaysia without permits for fear of facing legal action. From the moment you surface from diving to an underwater wreck, only to realize you only struck copper, and not some elusive artifact, you feel that same sense of disappointment, of longing. There's just something missing. This is the first story in the series that doesn't first focus on plot. It instead uses Nathan to drive the story forward. Or should I say, it genuinely cares about how Nathan views the situation when considering how to move the plot forward. I've already talked in other videos about the difference between plot versus character-driven stories as the distinguishing factor between blockbusters and indies. One can be shallow but exciting, while the other is relegated to being thoughtful but a bit boring. What your script ends up reading more as can be attributed to the myriad of things, including budget, pacing, and what audience you're writing for. But a good technique I like to practice that intertwines character and plot is to follow this flowchart. Step 1, you let a character's emotion drive their actions. Number 2, you give those actions consequences which affect the plot. Step 3, use the consequences to inspire a small change inside your character. And number 4, allow that change to influence their emotions. Rinse and repeat. In essence, that will allow your character's thoughts and feelings to drive the story's momentum, while tying each event directly into their personal growth. In the past, things just sort of happened to Nate, and he went along with it. But he's different here. He deliberates, he's patient, he's tactful. And it's through this that we see what's really going on in the mind of Nathan Drake. He shoved all the relics from his past adventures up in the attic, and he gets the same rush he would have previously gotten dangling from a train car off the side of a cliff by running through a shooting gallery with a toy gun. This same sort of empty feeling carries over to dinner, where Nate can't help but get distracted by a painting hanging on the wall. Elena's words fade away as thoughts of adventure start to take their place. We're fixed in Nate's subjective point of view for this scene, so we see Elena immediately as the opposition when she rips Nate out of his fantasy, and goes on to test him to see if he was actually listening. However, the perspective quickly shifts to something more objective, and we see Elena actually urging Nate to take this Malaysia job. See, this is a job that Jameson has asked Nate to pursue multiple times. It's Nathan who is shutting it down. He tells Elena the reason why is because he believes that's what she truly wants. Despite her insistence, Nate continues to shut her down. Nate's so wrapped up in self-doubt that it feels like every little thing is a test. Nate feels that he locked himself into a life, into a promise where he's set up to fail, where everyone is against what he truly desires. Throughout the story, Nate is obsessed with doing whatever he can to protect Elena and preserve the life he's cultivated. But right now, he's living a life where he believes his marriage is walking on eggshells. And the thing he did best is suddenly a ghost of his past that lingers in the shadows whenever he's alone. So when Elena asks,
Hey,
are you happy? Why would his answer ever be yes? Because that's the only way Nate can be content with himself. Nathan Drake, of course, faces more higher stakes conflict as the story goes on. But right here we see that his biggest fight is within his own head. Nathan knows that Elena left the adventuring life because she cared about him and didn't want to risk her life, not because she condemned it. But how can Nate know that for sure? How does he know that she doesn't actually not want him to go on this job? And this is some elaborate ploy of reverse psychology. How would you act when you're anticipating what another person really thinks about a situation? It's a reactive state, one in which you're constantly at odds with your own best interests, and you shut yourself out from actual conversation. And if your self-created perception of something is based on a lie, how do you justify how you act? What are you really doing this for? We start exploring the consequences of this mindset in the next chapter when Sam mysteriously shows up. You see, Sam was stuck in a Panamanian jail for 15 years. Nate was forced to leave him behind after a botched prison escape, where it looked like Sam was shot to death. You see, all of this comes back to the treasure of Henry Avery. Investigating a lead on the treasure is what put the brothers in jail in the first place. Now freed, Sam says he's indebted to the ruthless drug kingpin Hector Alcazar after he was freed from prison. The only way the bounty on his head disappears is if they recover the buried treasure of Henry Avery. The same treasure that Nate and Sam had been chasing since they were young, the same treasure that Sam told countless stories about while doing time as a cellmate to Alcazar. Sam couldn't let it go. You see, this treasure hunt isn't just sprung as a neat way to save Sam's life. You can see it in the way that his eyes light up ever so slightly when showing Nate their first clue. It's the same look he got as a kid upon discovering the treasure was their mother's one that got away. This is a chance for the Drakes to prove themselves. Sound familiar? Of course, Nathan already did that. But right now he's not trying to promise that to a warlord or a megalomaniac obsessed with world destruction as they collapse into the ruins of a forgotten city. No, he's proving it to Elena. This promise is permanent. It's not just some kick-ass one-liner anymore. And it's so much harder of a promise to keep being on the inside, looking out. Saving Sam is what pulls Nathan back into this thought process of needing to constantly reassure yourself of your greatness, of your own choices. Nate found peace with himself when Elena said he didn't need to continue seeking fortune, and only needed a life with the people he cares about. But now someone he cares about needs his help with one last ride. Elena, the thing he promised to come back to, is now the one he has to abandon and villainize because in his mind, she's holding him back from what he needs to do. The thing he loves most. There's no clear right answer in Nate's mind. It's Sam's reintroduction into Nate's life that makes him revert back to this dangerous lifestyle. And as they get deeper and deeper into the hunt, Nate's fatal flaw creeps back in more and more. Just one more clue, and then we'll have it. Then I can get what I need and get out of this for good. I know I messed up going into this, but they wouldn't understand that. And just like that, we're back into the swing of things. Exploring scenic vistas and exotic locations, that improvisational, quick momentum style of exploration and action is here, but with a twist. We start off at a high-end black market auction to steal a cross that hopefully holds clues to Avery's gold. The brothers meet up with Sully to assist in what Nathan hopes will be a simple heist from storage. However, things get complicated fast. The cross is unexpectedly moved up in the auction, and Sullivan has to keep bidding on it, with money he definitely doesn't have, just to secure enough time for Nate to cut the power, while Sam disguises himself as a waiter to snatch the cross in the dark. On top of all of that, the boys run into an old partner of theirs named Rafe Adler, a spoiled rich kid who's been obsessed with defining his own worth by finding this treasure, paying out top dollar to get his way. Those dollars most recently went towards purchasing the loyalty of a mercenary army named Shoreline, headed by Nadine Ross. Once it's lights out, the jig is immediately up, and the boys have to scramble to escape before these goons catch up to them. Any of these hiccups would have been enough for Nate at the beginning of the story to have said no. But now that he's in the middle of it, jumping from rooftop to rooftop, scrambling to hold onto a collapsing rope as he dangles above a cliff face, it just gets more exciting. He improvises at every turn, just adding to the suspense that both he and I as the player am feeling. It's a different sensation knowing that you're at a disadvantage, rather than just going in guns blazing. However, it ends the same, and the boys flee a shootout and retreat back to a hotel. The cross holds a clue that leads them to Avery's supposed final resting place, St. Dismas Cathedral in Scotland. The same place that Rafe purchased years ago, has been excavating ever since. It's clear now more than ever that this was never going to be a simple heist. Now they're having to walk into the den of the beast, into enemy territory, to get what they want. In Scotland at Avery's grave, they find no treasure, only a series of bizarre tests. What seems like a rite of passage to a big treasure room only leads to another clue. The section from Scotland to Madagascar sees Nathan forced to dive fully back into his old life. As more Shoreline's goons block their way, Nate finds himself running into more firefights than avoiding them. Each new puzzle or mysterious pirate sigil he finds and decodes tells him something bigger is going on. It's not like the giant puzzle rooms in previous games, where Nate would just stumble into these grandiose chambers full of elaborate moving pieces that saw you line up shadows against a wall. Now these are more realistic, all either themed around Avery's obsession with the penitent thief St. Dismas, or knowledge on some of the most famous pirate captains in history. This is a test, a map to the legendary pirate utopia known as Libertalia. Like clockwork, the stakes get higher as Rafe calls Nate to let him know they're on his tail, and have tracked Sam to his location. Nate and Sully have to hurry to save Sam, which locks them into a high-speed chase through the city. They escape an armored truck. Nate jumps from the Jeep and gets dragged by a grappling hook through the mud and hops from truck to truck in order to reach his brother. The adrenaline you feel from the sequence is absolutely infectious. It just keeps going and going as more and more things start to fall apart around you. You have to try to find a new plan in real time. The sequence enters its climax after a bit of quick banter from Nate and Sam over who's hopping on whose vehicle. And something when Nate finds himself in a little trouble, Sam is there to pick him up off the ground and get things going again. This is sort of the last step in Nate learning to trust and rely on his brother again, after not having to do it since childhood, maturity-wise acting as the older brother now that they're caught up in the present. But that's not what's important right now, as Sam immediately starts driving you two down narrow alleyways trying to avoid the armored truck. This chase feels personal. That truck is absolutely demolishing surrounding buildings trying to get closer to you. It's like a feral animal gnashing its teeth at you, until you finally outrun it, explodes and careens over it, coming to a stop mere inches from you. Nate and Sam feel on top of the world at this point. Nate's not only ahead, but he's just performed arguably his most intense feat in his entire career, and he did it with his brother. Like the most whimsical parts of the other games, Nate drives off from the scene completely unfazed, absolutely free of consequences, even after destroying a major portion of this city. It's a worldwide adventure that's fun above all else. Nathan Drake is back,
treasure
and better than
as
ever.
good as
And then,
ours. Shit.
How's the Malaysia job going, Nate? Seems like you're a hair off course.
the world stops. The silence in that room is deafening. Nathan scrambles to try and explain, only realizing as he does just how much he's kept from his wife. He tries explaining the appearance of a brother she never knew he had, like that's going to help anything. The tone of the room makes it seem like Elena caught Nate cheating with another woman, in terms of how serious this is. And you feel that. He tells her he only lied because he knew how she'd react.
Like this.
Of course she would react this way. He was the only reason for the lack of transparency in the first place. I said it once and I'll say it again. I love Elena. Not just for her little quirks, but for her commitment to Nathan. Even though it was framed as this foreboding thing, I love that she worried about Nathan so much, she booked a flight halfway across the world just to make sure that he was okay. I love the extended sequences we get here, of the two of them just existing together. It paints this realistic picture of love that truly shows how it's about compromise, conversation. I love the detail in her facial expressions. Her eyes tell a story on their own. She looks so worried, helpless. Like there's so much more to say that Nathan's not hearing. I feel so much sympathy for her here, and I guarantee so does Nate. But it's here that Nathan has to double down on his choices thus far. Elena gives him the choice to come with her, but he won't. He says he has to go to Libertalia because without him,
Come on, you'll get
they'd both get killed. He's cocky. He's defiant. He's putting the weight of expectations entirely on himself. He tells Sully to go comfort her, reducing Elena to an object. The same woman that fought like hell for 3 whole games to follow Nathan into catacombs and ancient cities because she loved him and wanted to protect him. Her. Sully does as he's told, and Nate is left alone. The same people Nate spent 3 whole games with working together, having each other's backs, are gone. All because of what Sam has done and what Nathan has done because of him. But that's all okay, right? It's going to be worth it once they reach Libertalia, right? Before the Drake brothers reach the Lost Pirate Colony, Nate has to go on an exodus of his own. After an arbitrary boat chase, Nate ends up alone on the island, broken, bleeding, and in the rain. He's forced to venture deeper inland to try and reunite with Sam. That time for solitude and self-reflection isn't new to the series. In Uncharted 3, it even happened twice. But what makes it work here is the context of the last 3 games. We've already done the work of charting the cause-effect chain where plot influences character thus far, and this is the consequence of Nate's last decision. He's stranded all alone, now literally. In the past examples, the quote-unquote let's slow down scenes, as I've explained them, didn't necessarily reflect on any substantial character choices, other than just to say, wow, Nate's really in over his head here, which, I mean, fair. But as we learn more about what happened at Libertalia, we realize that what makes this game distinct is that this is the first treasure that actually has a direct effect on our characters. As I've said before, the original trilogy sees you exploring the ancient city of the day for only a select few chapters before it all crumbles away. Its treasures promise something along the lines of eternal life, ultimate power, and that's a secret we only learn about once the villain gets a hold of it. But inside Libertalia isn't some world-ending device that Rafe wants to use for his own benefit. No, this gold is a tool meant to provoke someone's obsessions. If Uncharted 4 was criticized for anything, it'd be for walking back on some of the progress Nathan made at the end of Drake's deception. Forgetting the fact that he had already made the choice that he didn't need any treasure, he didn't need to discover some long-lost civilization to prove himself. But I already talked about that. This final entry really takes the time to explore how Nate would come to that decision. It's reflective in the settings Nate explores too. This adventure trades running through sinking ships, or exploring opulent underground palaces for dreary, realistic catacombs, or cities crumbling at the foundation, retaken by plant life. Libertalia in particular has some of the most beautiful views in the franchise, some of the most detailed structures I've seen in a game. And yet to Nathan, he's conflicted. He's doing this begrudgingly, only agreeing to help to save Sam's life. There's not some grand sweeping shot of the place. Nathan and Sam stumble into it, and what they find is something worse than ruins. From here, we start to get a bigger picture of what's going on. Pirate captains Henry Avery and Thomas Tew founded an island, a safe haven for any and all pirates to come and start new lives. They must first prove their knowledge of Henry Avery and the pirate lords, trekking all around the globe following clues, until they uncovered this paradise. They pooled their wealth and lived in that bubble free from the rest of the world, where they can drink and be merry for the rest of their days. Sam and Nathan have followed in their exact footsteps, and we're watching it unfold in real time. They proved they were knowledgeable about the penitent thief. They were deemed worthy, picking the worthless coin over the treasure in Scotland. And they were directed to Madagascar, where they proved their worth to join the founders by recognizing their sigils. And they found Libertalia by pledging their loyalty to Henry Avery's cause. It's history doomed to repeat itself. See, it doesn't stop there. Nate's slow downfall here is a dark reflection of Henry Avery's foreshadowed descent into madness. As Nate continues to explore the city, he stumbles across signs of animosity. Skeletons hanging in gibbets along public streets. Lavish paintings of pirates, graffitied, labeled thief. There was a battle here. Multiple battles. A pirate civil war, composed of thousands of men who sought refuge in Libertalia, rising up against the colony's founders like Avery, Thomas Tew, Adam Baldridge, Christopher Condit, and Bonnie. But why? When Nate and Sam finally reach the treasury, it's not just empty, it's ransacked. The gold's been moved to the inner city, a collection of mansions belonging to the founders called New Devon. You see, the founders were hoarding the wealth, hiding it, lying to all the colonists. And they didn't like that. Greed and lies divided brothers all those years ago. And when Rafe and Nadine catch up to the brothers, it comes out that, what was it?
Dr. Alcazar died in a shootout in Argentina like 6 months ago.
Oh, Rafe was the one that let Sam out of prison, once he learned he was still alive. Rafe worked with Sam for years following Avery's trail, till one day, Sam had enough. Avery's treasure was always ours, he tells Nate. I left my life for you, Nate says, pushing him away. The brothers drink, both seeing the consequences of their lies and their greed for the first time. They knew who they were lying to wouldn't go along with it if they had told the truth. You see, deep down, Sam believes that finding the treasure will fulfill his life purpose. So much so that he's willing to die to get there. And they'll get there, just one more clue. One last time. Nathan is cornered and knocked off a cliff, plummeting into a shallow creek below. But what's changed here is that Nathan doesn't find himself alone again.
Thanks for saving me. Again.
The two of them just talk things out.
I almost didn't this time.
The next couple of chapters are spent in quiet reflection. The score overtakes the rest of the scene, and it's frankly beautiful. And as Elena retreats more and more, Nate is forced to express himself more and more clearly.
You don't have a right to shut me out like that. No matter what it is, you're supposed to come to me so that we can work through it together, as a team.
I know that. Really, I do. It's just...
You know, we should stay focused. There'll be time for this later.
It's just, I made a promise that I was done with this life.
We both did.
Yeah, but I broke it. I didn't tell you because I was afraid.
Afraid of what?
Of losing you. I guess I was protecting myself.
And through that, they come to the decision that they'll find Sam and leave the island as soon as possible. Treasure be damned. Nate assumes correctly that Sam is being forced to lead Rafe to New Devon, and so he and Elena head that way as well. From now through the end of the story, Nate takes a step back, and both you and he see a more objective view of the potential consequences of Nate's obsession and isolation through the story of the Founders. You see more of the colonists' revolt, and it's clear that this wasn't one-sided. The Founders sent soldiers to slaughter those below them. They barricaded themselves in one of the mansions, and when the battle was over, the Founders began to turn on each other, questioning who among them was truly worthy enough of the wealth. It was then that Avery and Two proposed a toast to, quote, abandon their animosities and unite under the banner of God and liberty. A celebration. They should be happy regardless, because now all the wealth in Libertalia had been consolidated from thousands of pirates down to just a roomful. However, when Nate reaches the large dining room where this was held, he sees the outcome of that.
It's them. Elena, these other pirate captains have founded Libertalia.
Say, bad drinks?
Thomas Two, Henry Avery. Looks like our hosts didn't stick around to clean up their mess when they claimed the treasure for themselves. Now, they took care of the colonists, but then they had to deal with each other. And I'm guessing things got pretty messy. So, Avery and Two invite them up here to,
Abandon our animosities.
abandon the animosities. Avery makes a grand toast. For God and liberty! Arg, ahoy, mateys, all that. And they all take a swig. Except these two. And just like that, all the treasure of Libertalia becomes the sole possession of two men. These are some of history's greatest pirates, and they all perished in an instant. At this very table. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
We later learned that even Avery and Tu turned against each other. Avery had plans to flood New Devon and escape with the treasure in his ship, but he wasn't fast enough. Avery and Tu killed each other, surrounded by the entire colony's worth in gold, as the ship sat sinking in the water. Just one more person left, and then I'll quit. Then I'll have the treasure all to myself. That eternal lie infects all who seek this treasure. Just one more clue, then we'll have it. It'll be worth all the heartbreak and all the deception that led up to this point. Like I said, both Drake brothers only lied because they knew who they were lying to wouldn't go along with it if they had told the truth. And when you get so far deep in a lie like that, you start to almost believe it. Sam is compelled to go back for the treasure, even when he has a chance to leave the island, which almost results in both his and Nate's deaths. Henry Avery proclaimed he did what he did for God and liberty, but we'll never know if he actually believed that because everyone who could attest to it is dead. Place yourself in his shoes. You gave in to your worst fears, and you acted on them, isolating yourself from everyone who has gotten you to where you are, and you're left ruminating on your own thoughts. You're in a horrible situation, and it's only going to get worse. But it's better than trying to find something new, right? You know yourself. You know these intrusive thoughts like the back of your hand. They're comforting. The help you need is what's unfamiliar. You get paranoid, you make assumptions. You feel trapped. You're looking for a way out instead of facing yourself in the mirror and seeing what you did wrong and taking the steps to get out of your own head. You preach for God and liberty, but practice something selfish and self-destructive. You write pages upon pages trying to justify yourself, and then centuries go by and someone stumbles upon your failed legacy and only sees the result, and it's sobering. It's too late to fix it now. Are you happy? The game ends with Rafe dueling Nathan in the burning, sinking ship where Avery and Tu saw each other's demise. Nathan's already made his peace. He's content to leave empty-handed, but Rafe says it plain as day, that he had everything handed to him his entire life. But he earned this. And he won't stop until Nathan and his entire crew are dead. Often the clearest way to define your protagonist is contrasting them with the antagonist. You can't prove a negative, so you'll often see a villain go one step further than the hero, highlighting their limits. Throughout this adventure, we see Nathan grow so much, learn so much about himself. I'm definitely overreaching a bit here. This game was definitely envisioned as a simplistic story that saw Nate and Elena's marriage tested as he fell to the temptation of the call to adventure once again. It would then be enhanced with naturalistic dialogue, beautiful graphics, and the signature addicting Uncharted gameplay. At the end, he'd learn his mistake and apologize, the end. But I recognized the nuances in their language, and how the story unfolded, and I saw it as something of a guide to understanding myself. Big shocker. Art is subjective and hits differently at any given point in time. I definitely didn't grab this much until my third playthrough a few months ago. What was it? I came for the pretty vistas and fun banter, and stayed to make sure Nate learned to understand himself. I loved this experience so much, I went through it again on Crushing just for the Platinum Trophy. And anybody who knows me knows what it takes for me to do that. And yeah, I had lock-on aiming on, but give me that at least. Like I said from the beginning, there's gotta be some merit to modern films, right? I'm not talking about your niche A24 darlings, or the next Fincher or Sorkin or Villeneuve masterpiece. I'm talking about your big hitters, the blockbusters, the summer fluff. There's a reason they're still getting made. That extends to television, and especially video games as of late. I started this series as a Lessons from the Screenplay ripoff for cringe Gen Z kids, but as I got older, I really wanted to dive into understanding myself through media. I mean, that's what good art is supposed to do, right? Elicit a reaction out of you. I feel like I've done that to a certain degree. Sure, there will be more that I learn about myself and the people around me as I grow and gain new life experiences. But for now, I don't think I need to be tied down this much, continuously striking that emotional chord that propels me into these deep fits of existentialism. It's healthy to an extent, but like I outlined earlier, soon enough those you once let in could become distractions. If I'm ever going to make an impact, I need to see more of the world. Try new things, be proactive in paving my writing career, all that jazz. Because at some point you have to stop and wonder, what's the value of all that treasure if it only ends up sinking the ship? Thank you, and goodbye.